Here are 3 scary camping stories. Story number 1. The Vanishing of Jared Negrete, the boy who disappeared without a trace. In 1991, 12-year-old Jared Negrete went on his first Boy Scout camping trip in the San Bernardino National Forest, California. He was supposed to reach the summit of Mount San Gorgonio. Instead, he vanished without a trace. His backpack was found. His camera contained eerie last photos. His footprints led deeper into the wilderness, then stopped. Despite massive search efforts, no body was ever recovered. What happened to Jared Negrete? This is the chilling true story of one of the strangest camping disappearances in history. Who is Jared Negrete? Jared Negrete was a 12-year-old Boy Scout from El Monte, California. He was excited for his first overnight hiking trip with Troop 349. He was described as shy, responsible, and a little heavier than the other scouts. His parents were hesitant about letting him go, but trusted the scout leaders to keep him safe. He had no history of running away or getting into trouble. But on July 19, 1991, Jared walked into the wilderness and was never seen again. The fateful hiking trip, July 19, 1991. Troop 349 was heading to the summit of Mount San Gorgonio, a 11,503-foot peak in California's San Bernardino National Forest. It was a difficult but manageable hike, even for young scouts. Jared was struggling to keep up with the group. The scout leader decided to leave Jared behind at a trail marker, instructing him to wait while they completed the hike. They expected to return in a few hours, but when they got back to the spot where they left Jared, he was gone. The immediate search, a race against time. At first, the scout leader assumed Jared had wandered off but would return soon. The troop called out his name and searched the nearby area. As darkness fell, panic set in. Jared was still nowhere to be found. The scout leaders rushed down the mountain to call for help. By morning, a massive search operation had begun. The massive search effort. 3,000 people and no answers. Over the next 16 days, an unprecedented search effort took place. More than 3,000 volunteers, including police, park rangers, and military personnel, joined the search. Helicopters with infrared cameras scoured the dense forest. Tracking dogs followed Jared's scent, but then lost it suddenly. What they found only deepened the mystery. The disturbing clues left behind. As search teams combed the mountains, they uncovered a few eerie clues. 1. Footprints leading to nowhere. Small footprints matching Jared's shoes were found deep in the wilderness. They led toward a canyon, but then suddenly stopped. There were no signs of struggle, no drag marks, and no animal tracks nearby. It was as if Jared had simply vanished. 2. Jared's backpack and food untouched. His backpack was discovered sitting neatly under a tree. Inside, his food, water, and flashlight were untouched. If Jared was lost, why hadn't he eaten his food? 3. The camera, Jared's last photos. The most chilling discovery was Jared's camera, found near his backpack. When searchers developed the film, they saw something bizarre. The last photos Jared took were strange, blurry close-ups. Some showed his feet and parts of his face. Others seemed to capture the darkness around him, as if he was taking pictures of something unseen. Was Jared trying to signal for help? Or was he seeing something terrifying in the dark? Theories. What really happened to Jared Negrete? With no body and no solid evidence, investigators and theorists have tried to explain Jared's disappearance. Here are the most debated possibilities. 1. He got lost and succumbed to the elements. Some believe Jared wandered too far and died from exposure or dehydration. The mountain is rugged, with steep cliffs and hidden crevices. It's possible Jared fell into a ravine where searchers couldn't find him. Temperatures dropped drastically at night, making survival difficult. Flaws in this theory. His footprints ended suddenly. Why? Tracking dogs lost his scent abruptly, as if he had been lifted off the ground. No body or bones were ever found, even after decades. Could something else have taken him? 2. He was abducted. Some believe Jared was kidnapped, either by a human or something more sinister. The abrupt end of his footprints suggests he was picked up or carried away. The San Bernardino National Forest has a history of disappearances. Some theorists suggest a hidden cabin, cult, or survivalist group may have taken him. Flaws in this theory. No one reported seeing suspicious people near the trail. The area was swarming with searchers. How did no one hear or see anything? 3. Animal attack? Could Jared have been attacked by a mountain lion or bear? Mountain lions are known to stalk prey quietly, sometimes dragging victims away. If Jared was sitting alone, he could have been ambushed. Flaws in this theory. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, torn clothes, or drag marks. Predators usually leave remains, but Jared's body was never found. Something else happened to him. For the supernatural theory, something took him. Some believe Jared encountered something unnatural. Strange lights and weird disappearances have been reported in California's wilderness. Some hikers claim to have heard whispers and seen figures in the trees. His last photos seem to show something moving in the dark. Did Jared see something he wasn't supposed to? Or did something in the mountains take him? The search ends, but the mystery remains. After 16 days, the official search for Jared Negrete was called off. His family refused to give up hope, hiring private search teams. Even years later, hikers claimed to have seen strange things in the area. But Jared was never found. Final thoughts. A mystery that haunts the wilderness. The case of Jared Negrete is one of the strangest missing persons cases in history. A boy disappeared without a trace. His backpack, food, and camera were left behind, but no body was ever found. His last photos hint at something eerie happening in the darkness. Did he fall? Get lost? Was he taken? Or was something lurking in the mountains that night, waiting for him? One thing is certain. The San Bernardino wilderness still holds its secrets, and Jared Negrete's fate remains unknown. Story number 2. The Smiling Man in the Woods, the Camper's Nightmare. Camping alone in the wilderness can be peaceful, until you realize you are not alone. A lone camper in West Virginia learned this the hard way when he encountered something terrifying. A tall, thin man watching from the darkness, grinning from ear to ear. The man never spoke. He never attacked. He just stood there smiling. This is the chilling true story of a camper's encounter with the smiling man in the woods. A solo camping trip turns into a nightmare. In 2014, a 27-year-old man, whom we'll call Mark, decided to go on a solo camping trip in the deep forests of West Virginia. Mark was an experienced outdoorsman, having camped and hiked alone many times. He picked a remote location, far from any popular trails or campgrounds. The area was densely wooded, with only a few scattered clearings. For the first night, everything was peaceful. But on the second night, he realized he wasn't alone. The first sign: strange sounds in the night. As night fell, Mark sat by his small campfire, enjoying the silence of the forest. Then around midnight he heard it, a branch snapping. He assumed it was an animal, maybe a deer or raccoon. He shined his flashlight toward the noise, but saw nothing. The forest went completely silent, which was unusual. A few minutes later, he heard another snap, closer this time. Something was moving in the trees, footsteps circling the tent. Mark tried to ignore it, convincing himself it was just his imagination. But as he settled into his tent, he began hearing something much worse. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling his tent. At first, he thought it might be a bear sniffing around his camp. But then, he realized the footsteps sounded human. The grinning figure in the trees. After nearly 10 minutes of hearing someone, or something, walking around his tent, Mark had enough. He grabbed his flashlight and knife. He unzipped the tent and shined his light into the trees. And that's when he saw him. A tall, thin man, standing just beyond the edge of the light. He was wearing old, dirty clothes. His head was slightly tilted to one side. His eyes were wide open, unblinking. But the worst part? He was smiling. Not a normal smile. A wide, unnatural grin. As if he was enjoying watching Mark's fear. The staring contest that lasted too long. Mark's blood went cold. He froze, gripping his knife tightly. But the man didn't move. He stood there, staring, smiling, and not speaking. Mark yelled, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" No response. The man didn't flinch. He just kept grinning. The slow, silent exit. Mark felt a wave of dread wash over him. He didn't know if the man was armed. He didn't know if he was alone. He only knew that this wasn't normal. Then, without saying a word, the man slowly turned around and walked back into the trees. No running, no fear, just that eerie, slow walk into the darkness. The bushes rustled as he disappeared. Then, silence. The sleepless night. Mark sat by his campfire for hours, gripping his knife, waiting to see if the man would return. But he didn't, or at least Mark never saw him again. The forest remained dead silent for the rest of the night. No insects, no owls, nothing. It was as if even nature was afraid. The morning escape. At first light, Mark packed up his gear as fast as he could. As he left his campsite, he checked the area where the man had stood. No footprints. No signs of anyone ever being there. Had he imagined it? Or was the smiling man real, but careful enough to leave no trace? Either way, Mark vowed never to camp alone again. Theories. Who or what was the smiling man? After posting his experience online, Mark received many possible explanations. 1. A deranged hermit or mental patient. Some believe the smiling man was just a disturbed person living off the grid. There are cases of hermits living in the woods for decades, avoiding society. Some suffer from severe mental illness, causing strange behavior. He may have been watching Mark out of curiosity or something worse. Flaws in this theory. Why did he not speak, react, or show emotion? Why did he disappear without a trace? 2. A serial killer hunting for a victim. Could the smiling man have been looking for someone to kill? Serial killers have been known to stalk campers in remote areas. His lack of communication could have been psychological intimidation. Maybe he realized Mark was armed and decided to leave. Flaws in this theory. Serial killers usually don't just walk away. They attack. If he wanted to harm Mark, why didn't he? 3. A supernatural entity. Some believe the smiling man was not human at all. Legends of grinning figures, shapeshifters, and shadow men exist in many cultures. Some think he was a demon, spirit, or something inhuman, feeding off fear. His unnatural behavior, silent movement, and wide grin suggest something beyond normal human experience. Flaws in this theory. There's no proof of supernatural beings. But then again, how do you explain what happened? Other cases, the smiling man phenomenon. After Mark shared his experience, other campers and hikers came forward with similar stories. In Kentucky, a hunter reported seeing a grinning man in the woods who vanished before his eyes. In Washington state, campers heard laughter outside their tents, but found no footprints. A hiker in Tennessee claimed he was followed by a tall, smiling figure for hours. Is the smiling man a real phenomenon? Or are people seeing the same thing in different places? Something that shouldn't exist? Final thoughts. A warning to campers. Mark's story remains one of the most disturbing true camping horror stories ever recorded. A strange man appeared in the woods, grinning but never speaking. He stood motionless, staring, before walking away. No footprints, no sign he was ever there. Was it just a crazy person? Or something more sinister? Something lurking in the deep woods, waiting for the next lone camper? If you ever camp alone and hear footsteps circling your tent and see a tall man grinning at you from the trees, don't wait to find out what he wants. Leave immediately. Story number 3. The disappearance of the Cowden family. A camping trip that turned into a nightmare. In September 1974, a family of 4 went on a peaceful camping trip in the Oregon wilderness. They were supposed to return home the next day. Instead, they vanished. Their campsite was found abandoned, a half-eaten meal left behind, as if they had left in a hurry. 7 months later, their bodies were discovered, murdered and hidden deep in the forest. Who killed them, and why? This is the chilling true story of the Cowden family. Their mysterious disappearance, their gruesome fate, and the case that still haunts investigators to this day. A happy family's last trip. The Cowden family lived in White City, Oregon, a quiet town where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Richard Cowden, 28, was a hardworking man, known for his devotion to his family. Belinda Cowden, 22, was a loving mother, caring for their 2 children. David, 5, was an energetic, happy little boy. Melissa, 5 months, was their newborn daughter, barely old enough to sit up. On September 1st, 1974, the Cowdens decided to spend Labor Day weekend camping in the Siskiyou Mountains, near Carberry Creek, a scenic spot deep in the Oregon wilderness. They had no idea they would never return. The last sightings of the Cowden family. On the morning of September 1st, 1974, Richard Cowden took his son, David, to a general store in Copper, Oregon. They bought milk, a simple, normal errand. The store owner knew the family well and saw nothing unusual. They left the store and returned to their campsite. This was the last confirmed sighting of the Cowden family alive. The abandoned campsite, a scene of sudden terror. On the evening of September 1st, the Cowdens were supposed to meet Richard's mother for dinner, but they never arrived. Concerned, Richard's mother drove to the campsite, and what she found sent chills down her spine. The family's truck was still there. The campfire was burned down to embers. Belinda's purse was still inside the truck. A half-eaten meal was still on the picnic table, as if they had left in the middle of eating. The family's swimsuits were missing, but everything else was undisturbed. Something had made them leave in a hurry. But what? The search begins. 200 people, no clues. The search for the Cowdens was massive. Over 200 volunteers combed the mountains. Helicopters and search dogs were brought in. Carberry Creek and surrounding caves were searched. But there were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, and no blood. It was as if the family had vanished into thin air. For 7 months, there were no answers, until a hunter made a horrifying discovery. The gruesome discovery, the fate of the Cowdens. On April 12, 1975, 7 months after the Cowdens disappeared, 2 hunters were hiking in a remote area of the forest, 7 miles from the campsite. They stumbled upon a cave, and inside, they found something horrific. Belinda and the 2 children were stuffed inside the cave. Richard was found nearby, tied to a tree. All of them had been brutally murdered. The autopsy results: Richard was beaten to death. Belinda and David were shot execution style. Baby Melissa had been killed by blunt force trauma. It was a massacre, but the biggest question remained. Who did this and why? Theories. Who killed the Cowden family? With no clear motive and no forensic evidence, investigators were left with only theories. Here are the most disturbing possibilities. 1. The work of a serial killer? One of the strongest theories is that the Cowdens were victims of a serial killer. The brutality of the crime suggests someone who had killed before. The killer took time to hide the bodies, meaning he wasn't rushed. The remote area of the cave suggests the murderer knew the forest well. There was one suspect who fit this profile perfectly: Dwayne Lee Little. 2. Was it Dwayne Lee Little? The most likely suspect. In 1974, Dwayne Lee Little was a dangerous ex-convict living near the Cowden campsite. In 1964, he raped and murdered a 16-year-old girl in Oregon. He was paroled in 1974, just months before the Cowdens were killed. After the Cowdens' deaths, he was later arrested for attacking another woman in the same area. A former cellmate of Little claimed that Little admitted to killing the Cowden family. However, police never found enough evidence to charge him. Did he stalk the family, attack them, and drag them into the woods? If so, why was there no sign of a struggle at the campsite? 3. A random attack by a stranger? Some believe the Cowdens were attacked by a drifter or unknown assailant. The killer may have lured them away from their camp. The lack of struggle suggests they may have trusted their attacker. Some locals reported strange men wandering through the area around that time. But if it was random, why was the family targeted? 4. Something more sinister? The supernatural theory. Some have suggested something unnatural happened that day. The family disappeared without a trace, leaving no evidence of where they went. The way their bodies were hidden seemed ritualistic. Locals tell stories of strange lights and eerie sounds in the mountains. Could the Cowdens have witnessed something they weren't supposed to? Or did something, human or not, hunt them in the woods? Why hasn't the case been solved? Despite decades of investigation, the Cowden family murders remain unsolved. The lack of forensic evidence has made it impossible to prove who did it. The wilderness is vast, making it hard to track down more clues. The main suspect, Dwayne Lee Little, has never confessed. To this day, the case remains one of Oregon's most haunting mysteries. Final thoughts: a family lost to the wilderness. The Cowden family's last moments remain a terrifying mystery. A young family went camping, expecting a fun weekend, but never returned. Their abandoned campsite hinted at sudden terror, but no sign of why they left. When they were found, it was clear they had been hunted, taken, and brutally murdered. Who killed the Cowdens? And why was their killer never caught? One thing is certain: the forests of Oregon still hold their secrets. And if you ever find yourself camping in the Siskiyou Mountains, remember, there are things lurking in the woods that are never meant to be found. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more stories.